Hi, everyone. Nice to be at our first physical event for a while now. So I guess let's kick off by just talking about the industry here and the SEA kind of landscape. So in terms of SEA as a region, which opportunity has you most excited today? Maybe start with Julian.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. Really weird to be at a conference. So Voodoo recently set up in APAC, and we decided to use Singapore for our headquarters. So Voodoo is a hyper-casual game publisher. And for us, the attraction is pretty simple. It's talent. As a company, we're very good at talking to lots of talented developers around the world, but really to unlock the opportunities of APAC in general, Southeast Asia in particular, we recognized we had to be closer to where the talent is and be able to talk to them, hire our amazing publishing managers to interact with all of the development talent around the region, meet people like Simon, and a lot of the folks that we saw today. So we're super excited to be here, to be in the region. We feel it's really a critical initiative for Voodoo in terms of our future growth.
What about you, David? Because you do a lot in the region. What's your perspective on kind of the most interesting opportunity right now?
Hi, I'm David. I'm founder and CEO of goGame. So we are a 5.5-year-old company with offices in 7 countries across Southeast Asia. We are invested by Sega and recently by KDDI, a telco from Japan. So obviously, if you look at the way that I set up the organization, you see we are very Southeast Asia focused. And the reason why we did that was to tap on the various opportunities there are in the region. Singapore as the headquarters, where we could operate and we could find a lot of talent with the likes of Ubisoft around and Disney, Viacom, Turner, all the big game studios brought a lot of talent from all around the world. Because to build and to operate and to publish titles all around the world, you definitely need, first of all, talent, right? So the opportunities I see is that in this region, as we saw in the Newzoo report, that it's exploding. First, the smartphones are growing at a phenomenal rate. I actually came into the mobile games business in 2012 with Gumi, which was another Japanese game company that we built headquarters out of Singapore. And back then, things were very different. You could get a dollar CPI from the US. Today it's 10 to 15 bucks, so totally different industry. But when you look at Southeast Asia, still there is tremendous opportunity here. Although CPIs are still low, the market is growing at a phenomenal rate. There will be over probably 1 billion new handsets coming into the emerging markets in the near future. And that would give us much larger access to gamers and players. So, yeah.
Okay. For Damien, I mean, how does AAA fit within that? Because this is primarily, I guess, a mobile market, as these guys have discussed. How do you see that panning out?
Hi, everyone. Do you guys hear me? Perfect. All right, so I think I will join Julian and David on the talent side. So Ubisoft Singapore has been open since 2008, and we obviously developed a lot of the AAA games and titles that Ubisoft has shipped, recently Assassin's Creed Valhalla. And I think the interesting thing with us being in Singapore and working on AAA industry is really this, how do we grow the talent here and the maturity that we are getting with the team and with the talents in Singapore, but also within the region. For us, obviously, as like one of the major AAA company, the main opportunity in the next near future is going to be the development of the cloud gaming. How do we reach more players within the region through the development of cloud gaming, like breaking the rules of hardware and access through new ways. We mentioned in the previous presentation the subscription model that will really change the rules and potentially create way more opportunities for us as a AAA company in the region.
I mean, you just touched on something interesting there that I was going to come to, but I mean, you were talking about talent and the unique opportunity here. So, I mean, on the topic of talent, like one of the more common observations, especially from overseas companies, is that communication can be a challenge, and getting people to be vocal and to speak up, like maybe they would in Western countries, is a challenge. Like, is that something you guys have encountered at Ubisoft, and kind of how have you addressed that?
So diversity is really at the core of the Ubisoft, not only in Singapore, but overall. I mean, we have studios all across the world, and we're working at a global scale to build games. So this needs to be part of our DNA. Like, if we can't afford to do that, then we just can't make our games. So here in Singapore, I think the by nature, the way the city is built and this diversity that we have really helped us, grow on making games that take into account all the different profiles and origins of everyone. And if I was to say, okay, do you want to set up in Singapore? And I was like, yes, go ahead, and you will actually benefit a lot from that. That's going to be one of the diversity, the variety of the profiles, and the experience will really bring a lot to the creativity of the games that you're building.
Okay. I'll follow up in a second, but Julian, I mean, Voodoo has studios all over the world. I mean, are there any kind of learnings or observations that you guys have on how to address this?
So we have some internal studios. We have around 2,000 different studios that we work with around the world. And some of these studios are one person, two people. It's like the really indie side of the business. And we view our mission, and our mission is to entertain the world, is to actually coach these studios. And we don't look like other publishers. We don't look for games that we want to publish. We look for talent. And so often we find these people before they have developed anything, but they have ideas, they have drive, they're ready to fast prototype. And we teach them, here are the trends that are working in games today. Here is how you lower the CPIs of your games. And suddenly you take some 17-year-old kid from India, and he has a #1 game around the world. And this is a system that we've developed that we're incredibly good at doing. So we have our publishing managers that I was mentioning earlier who coach studios. And because we have a very long tail of studios, some of them go through all of the live streamings that we do, but it's very much an idea of education. So at the heart of it is a communication between us and the development studios. And our issue is not so much, are they not willing to be vocal? A lot of what we do is to teach them how to, however much they may be in love with their idea, how they need to learn how to move from that idea to something that may be the unlock for the next #1 hit game. And so a lot of our coaching is to help them get over things that they're in love with and say you have to, in our case, simplify, create a core gameplay that is more addictive, faster, easier, and something where we can get the kind of CPIs that we managed to get, which are like 15, 30 cents. And that's the secret of what we do.
Okay, that's very cool. I mean, I have a question for David, because I mean, you're a stalwart of the Singapore games industry. You've been here a long time making games, and you've had your studio now for 5 years. Damien was touching on the topic of diversity. At goGame, what does that look like? What kind of, I mean, because people talk a lot about the talent pool, right? What kind of percentage of your leadership team would you say Singaporean PR, for example?
I think it's evolved over the last 5 years. When we started off, we had people from 10 different nationalities within the Singapore headquarters. But as we started to expand across the region, now I have an office in Singapore, Malaysia, Thailand, Philippines, Vietnam, Taiwan, Indonesia, right? So we started to build out leadership in all those local places. And I mean, I do agree with what you said earlier, right? I feel that gaming has a language of its own. One of the key problems that we face is always communication between different studios because of the different languages. Like talking to our developers in Vietnam, we have probably 50 developers there. We have to always look for people with really good English there that has that passion and that leadership quality besides the development capability to be able to lead that team. Right, and it's really challenging, especially with the likes of Gameloft and Ubisoft. They're competing for all the local talent that I have, even locally. I think I've lost several people to Ubisoft recently. But that's the challenge of the local industry, I feel. But we just have to do our best. Yeah.
So would you be able to put like a rough figure on that?
In terms of
like, you know, studio leadership and development, kind of what the Singapore PR mix versus EPs looks like, for example.
I think in the recent times, most of them are now Singaporeans. Because of COVID, we were rather badly hit. We haven't gone back to our office. Out of the 7 offices, only 2 of them are working from office. So I've been paying a lot of rental for nobody there, right?
Same as all of us, man.
A lot of the passes don't get renewed, and some of the people during this time want to be at home with their families. So, yeah, so it's changed.
And I guess the follow-up question is, because it's coming through on here as well, is for you, Damien. Like, what does the local, say, foreigner split look like at Ubisoft, especially at like development level, not say admin and HR, but kind of on the teams?
So I think the most important thing for us is finding the best pool of talent. So in the studio you have 36 plus nationalities. The interesting thing that we see, because we've been here for quite some time, since 2008, is now that we really see people that started with us back in the days going up to those director position and joining core teams and having, you know, really now this global impact. So I'm not going to, I don't actually know the statistic, and I'm not going to go into that detail, and we could follow up on that after. But what I know now is that I've seen, so I've been myself in Singapore since 2014. And I've grown myself together with my teammates, and we really see now that there is a really strong pool of talent that have grown from the Japan, from the local and universities, and are really stepping up now. And honestly, they are on par with the rest of the AAA industry. I mean, when we develop games like Assassin's Creed Valhalla, we are on the table with the core teams in Montreal, and those guys really have, you know, nothing to be ashamed of.
So would you say then that the local talent pool is being developed and grown by Ubisoft?
I think it's an ecosystem thing. Obviously, we have a role there, but there's been other companies, and we saw in the previous panel also the indie dev community is developing strong in Singapore. And you actually see both ways. You have people leaving Ubisoft to go to indie structures, but you also have people from indie coming to Ubisoft. And actually, it's really an ecosystem thing where, you know, talents go in and out. There's elements to grow from both sides, and I think it's making the ecosystem in Singapore extremely interesting at the moment.
Okay. So talking about the interesting ecosystem in Singapore, I mean, you touched upon why Voodoo just opened an office here. But maybe, is there anything else you'd like to add on to that in terms of what, say, because you guys could have set up anywhere, right? Voodoo is one of the most impressive companies in mobile, and you kind of knew APAC, SEA offices here. What was the kind of rationale behind that?
No, I mean, it's an interesting question, because actually Voodoo historically, other than our studios, where we have studios in Berlin and Barcelona, in the UK, and so we'll have studios in different locations. But the system that Voodoo developed is this ability to scale massively tons of games. I mean, this year we will do some 2 billion downloads. I mean, just to put that in perspective, if you take all of the downloads from Snapchat and you add all of the downloads from Instagram, and then you put in Zoom, and then Spotify and Netflix, all of those together, that's less than the number of downloads of hyper-casual games that we're going to be doing this year. And the system is run by a really small team. We're around 300 people at Voodoo. And our number one market is the US. We have nobody in the US. Everything has been run historically outside of Paris. And when we were looking at what is the next phase for Voodoo, there's a number of key initiatives that we launched. And APAC was really one of the central ones. And very uniquely for APAC, we said, okay, we can be number one in the US, no problem, by being in France. But actually, to unlock this opportunity, we're going to need to be closer to where this content is, where new trends are emerging in gaming, where different channels, different distribution, and that led us to say that we needed centers in China and in Japan, which are two big markets for us. And then I happen to be living in Singapore. He said, Singapore is a pretty good place to be in terms of overseeing all of APAC, which is why Singapore is such a successful hub for Southeast Asia and APAC for so many countries. And obviously, I think things that were said earlier in the day apply to us also. It is a very business-friendly environment, and it's, back in the days when we were traveling, very easy to travel everywhere. So that's why we went for Singapore, and it's been great.
I mean, just following on from what you just said, the region is not super skewed to hyper-casual. Like, how do you see your pipeline kind of within, say, tastes in Southeast Asia, right, which tend to be very geared towards competitive multiplayer, RPG, some AAA as well, especially on PC. Like, how does that fit?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of the interesting things because I don't see that as a barrier. I see that as an opportunity. I mean, if you're to look on App Annie right now, the number one game in India, in Indonesia, in Vietnam, in Thailand, number 4 game in Singapore, number 2 in Korea, it's our game. We have 2 of the top 5 games in 112 countries right now. And it's the same game which is number 2 in China. And this game is number 2 in the US. And so when you're thinking about it that way, actually the very same game is scaling everywhere the very same way. And we don't see it at all as a barrier. I mean, this year, our reach in Southeast Asia and the number of installs we're doing in Southeast Asia has grown 93% year over year. So there's no lack of appetite for hyper-casual game. We're doing fine. But where you are absolutely right, which is there's a difference between having a lot of reach and unlocking the full potential of the market. And when we look at some of the trends, the more competitive side, the RPG elements, these for us are paths to create even more value and learn maybe things from Southeast Asia that we then bring to the rest of the world, or adapt some of the things that we're doing in the rest of the world to do even better in Southeast Asia. So it's really exciting. I mean, we're all about learning. The whole point of Voodoo is rapid prototyping and constant evolution of our content. So we have no set rules of this is the only way to do it. We're constantly in a learning mode, and our indie developers that we talk to are often the ones teaching us or inspiring us to see different ways of creating content.
That's very interesting. Continuing on the Southeast Asia theme, so David, I mean, as you mentioned, you have a presence throughout the region and probably the most experience of anyone in this room really shipping in Southeast Asia. What do you see as the most common pitfalls that kind of foreign companies coming into Southeast Asia typically fall into?
Depends on what they want to do, right? If they are launching greenfield into a territory, it's better to make sure that they do their research well, right? I mean, I just want to add on to what the previous question that you asked. I was with EA about 12, 13 years ago, And we were here only because Singapore government gave a lot of incentives for us to set up a beachhead here, right? To sort of establish the presence and reach out to the whole region. And we brought 250 people. We hired 250 people in a very large office here. And from that talent, it then spanned out to a lot of the other studios. Some of them, I think half of them went to Ubisoft when EA shut down, right? A lot of them went out to set up as heads of the different gaming companies across here, right? And I think, Julian, you were also from 2K, right? As the head of this region, and Hubert was also from there and then became head of Unity. I think that trickle-down effect actually caused an explosion of development here in Singapore that spread across the region. But through that time, there were a lot of local talent that was hired that then learned from all these industry veterans that came from France and Canada and the States and all the rest. And that's where we are now 15 years later. But recently, we have published over 50 titles over the last 5 years, right? For the likes of Sega and some European countries from companies from the West that try to come into Southeast Asia. So most of them, when they publish their titles, they don't think of Southeast Asia as a target market. Everybody just looks at US or China or Japan, right? Because traditionally that's number 1, 2, and 3 in the world. When I first started in 2012, Japan was number 1 in the world. US was number 2, China was number 3. But now it's totally the opposite, right? China is now number 1, and Asia forms 51% of the global market. But the European companies and the Western companies are still looking to come into this part of the world, but most of them don't have an idea that they think of Southeast Asia as one area, but actually it's 6 different languages, it's 6 different cultures and restrictions. So they need help. So that's why we are here, right? To help those the West to come to the East, and Eastern companies like from China to try to get to the markets of the West. And I'm happy actually to see Voodoo coming in here, because you bring a lot of these incredible expertise, the iterative processes that you have. I've actually learned a lot from that, and I know that the local industry is also going to benefit from that as well.
Awesome. So Damien, you mentioned cloud earlier, and how Ubisoft's looking especially at Singapore for talent pool. But beyond that, as a regional market, is there any kind of additional thought around that, or kind of more specific angles, or is it more generally a talent play?
So I think because we mainly publish on consoles and PC, so as you said, Singapore is one of the PC market for us in the region, but a way for us to really reach out to the full potential of the market here through the AAA market will really be like finding solutions for people to play games without having to invest in physical hardware, or to not have to buy the games at the price that they are currently. So I think the market is changing on that aspect, and we are seeing interesting moves. Ubisoft is partnering obviously with Stadia from Google, and also with Amazon Luna, which is in the beta phase right now in the US. So we really hope to see those solutions coming out more globally and hopefully reach us in the region. Something that also as a developer I look really forward to is having those solutions being deployed in Singapore, because they can really be game changers for us as developers, and we saw it especially in North America during the COVID lockdown. They were using heavily those solutions that really make a strong difference for us to be able to easily iterate, deploy, play without having any kind of like constraints tied to any hardware, and that really is a game changer, not only for the players but also for the developers.
I'm conscious of the fact we have some interesting questions behind us, and there's about 15 minutes left, so I'm just going to ask 1 or 2 more, and maybe we can take some of those. But well, for all of you, actually, what's your kind of one unpopular opinion, so the opinion that get you asked to leave the room, about the games industry in Southeast Asia? Do you want to go first, Julian? Like, what's your unpopular take?
I know you look at me, Simon, and you're like, okay, you're going to go with something really unpopular, aren't you?
I think we always spend a lot of time looking at the things that are moving fastest, and there's a reason for that, because that's where future opportunity is, right? So everyone's very excited about Southeast Asia because it's the fastest growing market. It doesn't mean that it's yet super big. So, you know, I think we shouldn't confuse volume with value. And whilst there are many interesting things that are happening here, I mean, in some ways, what you were saying, David, you're saying things have completely changed. It used to be Japan first, and then the US, and then China, and now it's China first. Yeah, in some ways, nothing has changed, which is those free markets are still the dominant free markets. And Southeast Asia is what, 8.5% of the world population, 2.5% of the world gaming market. So, you know, we're excited because that means it has room to grow, but it's 2.5% of the world market. So I think there's a balance between the excitement around the opportunity of growth and the reality of the size of the market today in terms of its value. But please don't kick me out.
Do you want to go next?
Sure. On my end, I think the something that isn't popular is basically sometimes, you know, people being scared of failing. And I think, and it was also mentioned in the previous panel, I think the larger scale company like Ubisoft actually allow us to fail and try things. So it really is a good opportunity for talents to experience, grow, and get better at what they do every day.
David?
I think it's loot boxes. Recently, there's been a lot of bad flag on loot boxes, right? But I started in the mobile world with a game called Brave Frontier, which was big in monetization. It was a role-playing game back in 2013 when I launched it, and we made a lot of money. But unfortunately, for free-to-play, that's the only way. 97% of the people don't pay. And we have to pay developers, we have to pay servers, and it costs millions of dollars to pay for marketing to acquire the users, and 97% of the people are still freeloaders, right? And you depend on the 3% to pay for the other 97%. And that's the way that the business model is structured. That's the unfortunate part. And then when people have to spend a lot of money, some people spend thousands of dollars in a single game. That's why you saw that in Yuzu report, like that Genshin Impact was one of the top few monetizing titles in this country. Singapore, although it's small population, it has the highest ARPDAU in the region, right? Average revenue per daily active user in the region. There's high spending power, similar to Taiwan, maybe, or Japan is the highest ARPDAU. Southeast Asia is still really, really low, right? But whales are whales. You have to find that 1%, 2%, 3% of the people that's going to pay the thousands of dollars, that's going to make you the millions of dollars. That's how free-to-play works, but it's extremely unpopular, and people are trying to ban it and stop it. In Japan, they had a big ban about this gacha and how you need to declare exactly what's the percentage of drop rates and stuff like that. But that is how we survive in this market. 290 billion is spent a year on advertising and marketing for gaming, and the revenue is only 155 billion. So how does that make any sense? You spend more than what your revenue is incoming. That means there's a lot of people that are being kicked out of the industry every single year, being funded by VC money, etc.
That is a shocking stat. I'd actually never heard that stat.
It's also because of fraud. A lot of the people who advertise, 60% of it is fraud. It doesn't really get a real download. And that's also forming the 97% of people that actually don't pay in the game, leaving those people that are paying in the game. It's very different from hyper-casuals because your monetization model is a lot into advertising and a little bit into IAP, right? But RPGs and role-playing games especially, they're a lot into this. Also different from premium, where you have to pay before you even download it. So yeah, that is extremely unpopular, but unfortunately that's the only way that those companies can make their money, and there can only be a few of these big companies to have that share of wallet in the industry.
Yes, I struggle to disagree with any of those points, so yeah, I'm equally unpopular. So before we jump to the audience questions, there's actually one that I've been considering over the last couple of weeks, really, just looking at the news. So it's been a very interesting year for the games industry. Obviously, we've had record revenues and whatnot. But it's also been a very difficult year. There's been a lot of things that have been reported in the press and whatnot. So I know, Damien, like, your studio's been in the news. I guess I can start with you. Like, what lessons have you guys taken away from what's happened this year?
I think the most important thing is to always remember that we are a team, and that team is composed of human beings, and everyone needs to feel good and be considered, you know, as a proper team member in the team. And I think this is the process that we are in right now, is getting back on track, making sure that, you know, like, there is everyone is taken into account, and all the specificities of our team and diversity is respected, and everyone in the studio in Singapore, but at the company level, is also working super hard to make sure that we are back to this kind of standards of excellence, of making sure that everyone feels treated like a real good employee of Ubisoft.
David, Julian, do you have any thoughts on kind of the lessons learned from some of the troubles the industry's had this year?
Yeah, especially with COVID, right? This is the first lesson learned. Don't set up so many offices. Well, I think the post-COVID era will be very different. I've learned a lot of lessons on how to manage costs and how to probably manage remotely, especially when you need to do development from multiple locations, and online coordination, better processes like Scrum, Agile, Jira, etc. Right? So it's really important that you have a cohesive team regardless of where geographically they are located. And the other thing that I think is really important, and that would also address that point where you say that a lot of people don't really speak or be vocal about what they think, especially in Southeast Asia, where the culture is, I think, more muted. People don't really express themselves that much as opposed to those from the West. Is make sure that there's proper accountability, and give them that responsibility and make them own the project. And from that, they should be measured objectively by KPIs and outputs, rather than try and have leaders that would tell people what to do and dictate what needs to be done, and just you do what you're told. That kind of, I think this whole situation has taught me that's results-based, and accountability within the teams is really important, rather than top-down, authoritarian-based management.
So I'll give you something rather more controversial than what I said earlier. So this is my opinion rather than speaking as a representative of Voodoo.
I'm looking forward to
I have been in and around the gaming industry for quite a number of years. And I think one of the things that strikes me is that we always talk around how the gaming industry is more than music and cinema combined, and it's this huge business. But actually, if you look at a lot of the most successful studios around the world, and here I'm talking a lot on the console side of things, but it's also true on mobile, is that a lot of these companies hit unbelievable levels of success when the founders were in their 20s. And they hadn't done anything before. Now suddenly these companies are generating like untold numbers of selling untold number of units and generating mass profits, and these companies grow to be rather large-sized companies, but they have not really been run as businesses the same way the cinema industry has been run. And I think that there is a maturing process, and a few years ago the scandal was around the crunch times that we were seeing in development studios. Do you remember that? And it was just really part of this, I think, maturing process of the industry. And clearly, you see industries when success has come fast, where there are things that are just not acceptable. And I think there is, and we've seen this across a number of different industries, this isn't specific to gaming, this moment of maturing and saying, guys, this business employs now a ton of people. There's a lot of money behind the gaming industry, and the type of corporate culture within companies needs to be at the same level as you would expect from any other large publicly traded entity in other ones. And I think that's a change that we're seeing happening now.
I don't think that's remotely controversial. We have to grow up, basically, as an industry, right?
I think saying growing up is generally very controversial. I try that with my kids all of the time.
Yeah.
It doesn't go down so well.
Okay. No, I think you guys all touched on something very interesting, actually, that the lack of vocal communication can certainly play its part as well in things fermenting and festering. I'm conscious we only have about 4 minutes left, so I'm going to jump to the audience questions. I'm going to take the first one as well, just so that no one feels like I'm not answering tricky questions. So how diverse are each studio team, like gender, etc.? Okay, so I'm going to have a stab at that. So Mighty Bear is, if I remember correctly, we're 45% female. We hit 50, which was our benchmark a while back, but we've been hiring, so it's gone down a bit. So we have a bit of work to do there. And in terms of etc., so Singaporeans PR is about 75% of the studio, and on the leadership team, it's, if I remember correctly, it's 70. But again, this goes up and down with hiring. I guess, Julian, you're pretty much the only person for Voodoo in Singapore right now, right?
No. There's Jill.
Oh, hi, Jill.
JILL at voodoo.io, who is our publishing manager. If there are any indie developers out there, email her. She's waiting to hear from you and get your games. And a number of other people coming on board. So a few Singaporeans. We have a majority, 66% of our employees right now are Singaporean. And 66% are female. So there you go. Beat that.
You're beating us, yeah.
Nice, you know the numbers. I don't know the numbers on my hand. What I can say is that, as I said before, is we are heavily invested in developing local talents and also looking at bringing in more diversity and gender diversity in our teams, because it really changes the way we make games, and also it reflects in the content that we are creating.
I mean, would you have like a vague guess just based on what you see at the studio?
So on my team, which is the Assassin's Creed team, co-dev team, around 90 people, I think we will almost be at 70% of locals versus non-locals, if I may say. And again, like we are growing every level of talent. So you have obviously people out of school. We have from interns all the way up to director level. So it's at every level.
And for you, David?
My studio is primarily in Vietnam, so it's mostly males there. There are just a couple of females and mostly art. I just hired a female programmer. Singapore is more publishing team, marketing team, so most of them are Singaporeans, although I think I do have Indonesian and Korean.
Okay. I think we've addressed that one. What's the next most popular question? Let's have a look here. Well, that's quite a spicy one. I think we just covered that. We're not really indies here. Let's talk about Julian. Okay, is HTML5 on mobile on the incline or decline, and why? How do you see it playing out? HTML5 is quite an interesting one because it's been, the next big thing since 2010.
So Voodoo primarily uses Unity. We just feel the gameplay experience is superior, and so most of our content is done on Unity. I'm intrigued by some of the things that I'm seeing happening on H5, and there's definitely a few initiatives, because there are a few channels specifically in APAC WeChat being a rather large one, where H5 is an important initiative for us. To date, we have not, Voodoo, have not monetized super well on H5, but we do have a new investor, Tencent, and they understand a thing or two about doing some really interesting things on H5. So we are working with them, and it's going to be pretty exciting. So I think we will come back to Gamescom next year when there are 30,000 people, and we will share some of the things that we will have done on H5. So I think for us, it's probably going to be on the incline, to answer the question.
Yeah.
I don't know if overall in the market that is necessarily the case.
I look forward to seeing you help HTML5 come of age after 11 years. David or anyone else, I mean, do you guys have any?
Yeah.
I guess HTML5 for cloud gaming is also interesting, but do you guys want to chip in with anything?
Actually, we just did a very big pivot to H5 recently. Not that recently, maybe 2 years ago. We've been building a platform for HTML5 games. As I said, we think that, especially for emerging markets, there is still a huge market for HTML5 games to get gamers into the ecosystem, because there are a lot of new mobile phones being sold, smartphones. A lot of them are the sub $50 phones with the low, very low specs, and the easiest way to get them in is to send them an HTML5 link, click on it, and then get into a service. I mean, the example I can quote would be Myanmar, Cambodia, Mongolia, countries like that, emerging markets, right? And that's why one of the primary reasons why KDDI invested in us is because of our H5 platform that we are building. I'm also running a program together with Enterprise Singapore to look at all the regional studios within Southeast Asia and Asia, in collaboration together with Cocos and Zapto Lab, the makers of Cut the Rope. We are running a competition for people to submit their H5 games to us so that we can help them to publish it. Right? Our goal is actually to work with the telcos and the super apps across the region and to bring as many of their subscribers onto a single platform. So my aim is to consolidate the gamers and build an ecosystem where they can come together, play games, buy games, and learn about games, watch game, like those popcorn gamers, right? Yeah, that's the plan. So if you do have games, you can submit it to us.
It's a good pitch. Gone. Okay. I think that's it then. We've overrun slightly by a couple of minutes, so thanks to everyone for hanging around to the end, and thanks to you guys as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.